Hello and welcome everybody to another Mutterings. I'm Mr. Nobody, the co-host of this channel, and go on.
Yep, and I would be the Farvithian Guard, the one who generally hosts the channel. Sorry, I've got a migraine again.
This is gonna be fun.
Oh, just shut up and just go.
It's gonna be
Okay, so
fun, boy.
this topic kind of got brought up by you, so I'll let you go ahead and introduce it.
All right, so a couple days ago, an article came out, and it was on Rock Paper Shotgun. If you're curious, you can find it there. We won't be reading through the whole thing, but
briefly explain the issues with Rock Paper Shotgun in the past for context.
they're trash. Moving on, one of their recent articles came out, and it has to do with 40K. It is, and I'm going to read the title, YouTube, Why Play a Fascist? Unpacking the Hideousness of the Space Marine.
Because we've never heard this argument from anyone else before.
Well, it's not like a guy who's mostly obsessed with politics will try to use this as a way to get the company to toe the right line and do what he wants by calling literally everyone and everything fascist.
90% of the quote-unquote mainstream gaming journalists, like we've said before, are failed political pundits.
Well, that's pretty much how it goes. Most of these people aren't game journalists by choice. They're game journalists because no one would actually hire them otherwise.
But the character issues aside, there was an article that came out that was particularly egregious again recently.
Oh yeah, that's the one that came out.
So do cover that.
All right, well, I'm not going to go and jump into the points. When I did my own video, I only covered about 3 of them, and then I had a personal aside on it. But it's really quite crazy when you read through it. It's almost a must-read to see the pure insanity that these people live in, because if this is actually what they believe, the Red Scare has never stopped for these people. They see a fascist under every blade of grass, under their bed, in their fridge, eating the tacos.
Well,
everywhere.
Of course, the inherent problem here is that they never understood the Red Scare to begin with, because it's the people and things they support that are actually the Red Scare itself.
But really, the main contents of this article come down to, I'm going to label everything and everyone a bad word, therefore I can try to exert my political influence on you. And I think they're doing it for a couple reasons, in my opinion, because going over his points are so inane. It's like,
you got to cover a couple of them at least to make the point, though.
It's really about trying to rope the company back into some form of control, because Games Workshop was effectively towing the line for a long time, and they don't feel like they have that kind of control anymore. But to get
even
to
though they still kind of are, they're just doing
a couple of his so-called points, which feels generous to say, is he pulls out the tried and true thing of every bad actor ever. Oh, don't you know, back in Rogue Trader, it was a parody, and now it's fascist LARPing. And I'm
now I have to bring up, what is it with every disingenuous article failing to comprehend that Rogue Trader and 40K are essentially 2 completely different realities? Rogue Trader was developed before Warhammer 40K had even been developed and realized.
Well, I think let's tackle this in a simpler way. The people writing this and using this as an argument have never created anything in their life. They don't understand how stories are developed or created. They don't understand how things move forward, and they don't understand really anything outside of, hey, here's something that can support my argument, and I'm going to make this argument, because they're not making it to people who know anything about Warhammer.
I guess that's true.
Any legitimate setting in which they're talking or trying to bust into or get control over. It's more for the people on the outside who are like, what is all of this arguing about? Well, that just sounds silly.
Well, the sad part is, too, if you look at anything in general lately, that effect is really dissipated considerably.
Well, yes, because you can only lie to people so many times before they look into it and they go, wow, that person was misleading me and seems to be a bad actor.
But since we keep going off on tangents, let's talk about the article itself and the
Okay.
author a little bit.
I'm not going to talk about the article or the author, honestly. I'm
Okay,
not.
well, I will say
I'm
that
going
this guy
to.
has popped up before and had some very, very bad takes in the past. And I will also say the article he's referencing multiple times in this was written by a very questionable author who did a big diatribe of a fucking thing about 40K and gaming in general that was
Oh
very
Lord, I forgot the
ill-informed.
guy's name. It was Tim. Um, I can't remember.
He's
Tim
written
something.
other things that I've
Tim
looked up, and
Colwell.
yeah, he's written other things. They've been equally poorly handled.
So, to give a basis of information, the guy that wrote this article generally writes garbage. He
That's
doesn't tend to have
generous.
very good takes, and he tends to use it as a way to fling all of his insecurities and anger at whatever audience he happens to be targeting at the time. And the guy that he references, there's another person that he references, but they're not even worth mentioning. Is a Australian unionist who's been trying to unionize the game developers of Australia. And let's
All
just
of
say
them.
that both of these guys have a kind of weird obsession with fascist that almost sounds like it's their fetish, but they're
Projection,
angry
maybe.
about it, and it's very odd. But the article itself is very it's basically written in a very contemptive way, or a bitter manner. Let's say bitter manner is a
I'd
better
say
way to
that would
put it.
be accurate.
It projects a lot of anger at the existing audience, and if you get down to a certain point, he starts to talk about himself in this manner that made me go, what in the hell? Because he goes off on how space marines are made and how it's a mockery of all these Chad kind of thing. And then he starts talking about the wound of masculinity on
Is that
himself.
actually in his article? Can we like cite that verbatim? Can you is like you have
I
that
have
handy?
to go down to the exact part because I
Because
do
my
not.
God, the way he words that is so
You want me to actually
cringe-worthy.
read that?
Read that part. It's ridiculous.
Okay. I will read this one section, and I will we'll go from there.
Yeah.
This is the quote from the article, and I quote, "I'm not immune to this hellish daydream. It's a carnival mere show for all the tacky little aggressions and humiliations of my own upbringing. I understand my own masculinity as a wound that is slowly healing and which is opened periodically by the experience of art that cultivates the old patriarchal frenzy."
And what a sad, like legitimately sad, pitiful outlook on an element of your very being, your own masculinity, and this is what you think of it. That's
Well,
sad.
it's clear he's grappling with some things in there, and he's projecting his anger about them outward.
I mean,
But I
I'm
mean,
hardly a fucking psychiatrist, but good fucking lord, that is some
this
shit.
article is a really. I'd suggest if we did a class on disingenuous people in hobbies or entertainment, that this should be one of the first things that's mandatory reading.
Yeah.
Effectively, it embodies everything. It reduces every argument to calling someone some kind of bad word so that you can label people who disagree with you and try to discount any argument. Like, he doesn't make actual arguments in it. He just accuses and then leaves the accusation hanging that you're a bad person by association if you disagree with his point.
Which, of course, is a sadly typical arguing point of leftist
There's
media.
a point where he tries to insinuate that the older fan base for Warhammer are Nazi adjacent, There's a
Multiple
part
times.
where he tries to use, for example, this is one of the points he puts in there, which is completely disingenuous to all the arguments I've seen, where he tries to take the could we call them secondary leads, Charon and Gabriel?
I'd say they're the two supporting leads.
Okay, the whatever, and he wraps it into two arguments.
Which are both
First
stupid.
off, he uses it as an attack for anyone who thinks it's kind of weird that the Ultramarines now suddenly have Scottish, black dudes and Asians from the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
I still think they could have done a Death Watch game and it would have made more sense because you could have introduced more chapters.
And there would have been less trouble with any of this.
I don't care. They could just say the Ultramarines have expanded their recruiting to other worlds, and then said, "Oh, this world has these kind of people." What? It doesn't matter. But he tries to insinuate people who had problems with that as both racist for disagreeing with their use or their thing, or even questioning it. Mm-hmm. Then he tries to turn it around as a knife in the side against Games Workshop, calling it diversity washing.
Diversity washing?
He quotes and I'm going to quote him, quote, "He is similarly unimpressed by the recent diversity washing of the settings Ubermensch." And he uses Ubermensch. Fuck off.
What a dick.
And this is one of the things he's taking from Colwell, who is, again, remember, the Australian dude.
And I will, by the way, mention that in a similar display of bigotry, this is the same guy, this Australian author, who was lamenting the fact that U.S. service members were allowed and, in fact, were in attendance at some of these Warhammer events.
Now, let me quote this other part. "And by Games Workshop's effort to market this most vicious of fables to younger teenagers and children, even as older enthusiasts show up to events in Nazi regalia, or cheekily portray noted," and this is a completely psychotic thing to say, "Hitler sympathizer Donald Trump as present-day God Emperor."
Yeah, I love that he's called a... That pisses me off. All he actually said was that... how do I explain this? He basically said something to the effect of he needed military leaders like the ones that Hitler had who were loyal and could get things done. At no point did he display any empathy or sympathy for Adolf fucking Hitler.
Well, by that logic, is Will Smith actually more of a sympathizer with the Nazis because he tried to say nice things about Mr. Adolf?
Uh-huh. Yeah, good question, right?
It's a stupid thing, but it's also just a naked political attack on people.
Of course it is. Because that seems to be all this author is capable of.
It's a skid against everyone because he feels insecure about his masculinity.
Apparently.
He feels insecure by the fact he enjoys this property. He's a casual enjoyer, he claims in this article, by the way.
Oh, lovely.
And he's using it as a way to take that anger and upset because he has a bunch of mixed up feelings in his tummy. And he's projecting it out on other people. This article is really just an attack on people and a personal gripe fest because he feels insecure. And it's exactly what I would expect from people trying to, let's say with bad intentions, enter into any hobby. You could be in a knitting circle and somebody writes something that's like, anyone who believes in crochet is adjacent to fascism. It'd be that kind of stuff. It's this kind of childish attack on people. And it's like, there's not real, I had to try to struggle because it's a rambling mess of personal attacks, suggested bad actions by people, quotes to, and basically pleas to authority from people that most people are not going to even have any idea who they are.
Well, and the sad part of this is, if you really think about it, the sadder part here is that how typical this is of mainstream media, especially alleged gaming media. How typical this behavior and these opinions are.
Well, I think this is actually more damning on a lot of this, because this is not anything by a normal person. This is by some extreme subset of people desperate for control over you. And the mainstream media, well, let's just be perfectly honest, most of them are freaking leftist. There's not really a normal person in any of it. So really, the big problem I come down to, because I don't give a crap, really, is the article is just a vehicle to attack his political enemies, to gripe about his insecurities, and to list people he feels give him some degree of authority to attack other human beings.
Which is completely meaningless, because honestly, the only people I've seen talking about this article have been making fun of just how blatant and ridiculous it is.
This is the whole, that one lady who claimed all the bad things happened to her at a game store.
Oh, yeah, Arch talked about it way back in the day, where she claimed she was assaulted at a game store, and everybody's like, nobody would allow that. That story is obviously lies.
But to wrap up on this one, I'd say it's a listless, direction-lacking waste of time that's only really good to kind of highlight how crazy some of these people are and how disingenuous they are. They're not interested in having an argument, being wrong, being right. They just are interested in leveraging some degree of power over you.
More or less, yeah.
So, to move on to our last little bit, Mr. Farv, you had suggested we talk about some of the hubbub going on
I will bring
with
that
Metroid.
Up. Okay, so I, again, care of Smash JT, saw something come up about Metroid Dread's development team. It's a Spanish studio, because, you know, Nintendo keeps outsourcing, but whatever, that's a different issue. Metroid Dread was a decent game. I played it. And a lot of people started expressing concerns. Go ahead.
Aren't they the Metroid Prime developers too?
They might be the new ones, but I'd have to confirm that before I could be sure. Okay. I'm not sure about that. I know that they developed Dread, and they were the last company that Nintendo has licensed to actually develop Metroid games. So the issue is, it's a Spanish company, and they have recently made connections via social media with a Spanish influencer who has ties to the Spanish government called
oddly
Blizzy.
Enough, one I'm actually familiar with.
Yeah. So Blizzy is literally being apparently very accurately coined as the Spanish Anita Sarkeesian, who is not interested in games, only wants to use games as a platform for feminist arguments, and has been using identical arguments to Ms. Sarkeesian.
So, let me ask a couple things. I'm slightly aware of this person. Mm-hmm. I've seen some of their stuff, but I've never actually listened to it. I've just seen it when other people had mentioned this person. She's a feminist.
Yes.
Why does she dress like a whore?
Have you seen OnlyFans recently?
Oh, so she's OnlyFans. Okay.
She's not specifically an OF model, but she kind of has that same air as a social media influencer. She's always dressing very particular ways to grab attention.
Because I was always kind of wondering, because I've seen some of the arguments this person has made, and they're always about the sexualization of women. Yet she always seems to be sexualizing herself.
So she's on this faux crusade of wanting better representation of females in media, and by this it always boils down to no revealing clothing, no specific personality traits, this, that, and the other thing. Your typical third wave feminist nonsense. She's never even covered that I've seen.
Let me guess. It probably won't matter if it's a dude without a shirt on, huh?
Probably not, but I don't have any confirmation.
Okay.
What I do know is that she's gotten a bunch of handouts from the Spanish government to have appearances and you know, speeches and shit. And she said all this stupid public shit about feminism and gaming and problematic gamers and all this other bullshit that's so typical of, you know, Western mainstream media.
Okay. So
the issue that comes in is that recently the developers of Metroid Dread have made some inroads with this same fucking influencer, Blizzy, And it's got a lot of Metroid fans very uncomfortable.
Okay. Well, so what is going on with this
Well,
this association?
there's a lot of rumors because she's, as usual, making very feminist adjacent suggestions
Yeah.
that people are worried that Metroid's going to be headed the way of, Tomb Raider.
Um.
So there's a lot of words. They're like, do not fuck up Samus. They're like, Samus Aran is like a legitimate feminine icon.
Yeah.
She's literally one of the first female characters in gaming. And so a lot of not just Nintendo, but just straight up Metroid and Samus fans are like, do not fuck this up. So a lot of people are already calling for Nintendo to pull their license, cut ties, or basically force them to, cut ties with this influencer because they do not want any of this feminist Anita Sarkeesian-esque nonsense injected into Metroid.
So, my last question: how much influence and control do they have over Metroid?
Thus far, they're saying that they're only the current developer of Metroid, and this was apparently from one of the Nintendo spokespeople. I unfortunately don't have his name handy, but he was saying that they are only considered the current developer of Metroid. And let's be real, this is Nintendo. Nintendo will yank a license from a third party on a whim. We've seen this before. So it's going to be a matter of how much Nintendo is paying attention and how much they want to deal with IP brand damage.
All right. Oh, so here's my personal opinion. If you don't mind.
Go.
Okay. Well, I prefer to know what their associations are because
I would too, honestly.
if Nintendo forces them to disassociate, well, then they can just pretend and lie about it. So, personally, I like it when these companies admit who they're connected to and interested in associating with, because then I know who not to trust with certain developments or to buy their products.
Definitely
so,
agree.
I think this would be actually a good thing. As far as we know, Nintendo doesn't have any of this this stuff that's been slowly infecting some Japanese corporations.
Not that we've seen, anyway.
But
it's always a possibility because Nintendo is kind of infamous for making poor decisions at the worst times.
Well, I'd also make this argument. Nintendo's also got a largely OG staff in kind of charge of a lot of it. But when they go, how much of that is going to remain?
Well, we've kind of posed this question before. What happens to Nintendo once Miyamoto is gone?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a positive that we know, and now we know to watch it very keenly.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think this is a good story. I mean, if they can keep it out of the work, then who cares what they're associating with?
Exactly.
But now you know to be on guard.
I agree, yeah.
So, is there anything else?
That's all I got for that. Something I just caught recently and thought we should bring up.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
See you later, everybody.
Bye-bye.